Good evening. Hello.
Anybody else?
Sorry, guys. I was telling her I'm not going to talk. Okay. Good evening. First time this Hazel. How are y'all doing tonight? Are we ready for worship? Okay, cool. Let's stand up. Let's stand up, do worship songs, and then Pastor Lee is going to get into our Bibles. Thank you. Good job.
We have come into his house, gathered in his name to worship him. We have come into his house, gathered in his name to worship him. We have come into his house, gathered in his name to worship Christ the Lord. Worship him, Christ the Lord. So forget about yourself, concentrate on him and worship him. So forget about yourself, concentrate on him and worship him. So forget about yourself, concentrate on him and worship Christ the Lord. Worship Christ the Lord. So let us lift up holy hands, magnify his name and worship him. Let us lift up holy hands and magnify his name and worship him. Let us lift up holy hands and magnify his name and worship Christ the Lord. Let's worship Christ the There's honey in the rock, water in the stone. Stand on the ground, no matter where I go. I don't need to worry now that I know everything I need. You got me. There's honey in the rock. Yes, I'm praying for a miracle. Thirsty for the living well, and only you can satisfy. The sweetness, the mercy seat, I've tasted, it's not hard to see that only you can satisfy. There's honey in the rock, there's honey in the rock, there's honey in the rock, yeah, there's honey in the rock. There's freedom where the Spirit is, and there's bounty in the wilderness, 'cause you will always satisfy. There's honey in the rock, water in the stone. There's manna on the ground, no matter where I go. I don't need to worry now that I know everything I need. You got me. There's honey in the rock, purpose in the land. There's power in the blood, healing in your hands. You started flowing when you said it into everything it is enough. I keep looking, I keep finding. You keep giving, you keep providing. I have Jesus. Oh, how sweet to trust in you, Jesus. Amen. All right, y'all can be seated.
To see everybody here tonight. I'm glad you're here. Open your Bibles, glad you're here. Isaiah chapter 41, and we're going to look at chapter 41, and we're going to look at 42 tonight. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What a week since we met last time. Since we have gone through significant changes, international changes with our nation, and we'll talk about that a little bit in prayer time. We have stayed busy here. It's beautiful week, beautiful weather this week. Also thankful for that. We are in the midst of, and they tried to we bought a new refrigerator. And Mitch told you this a while ago. And we're going to cram it through this door for the service, and it's too tall for the door, so it's got rollers on it. And then we all the men got together and theorizing and get those rollers off, or how to get through the door, or take the door frame off, or anyway. So there it is. We're going to get it done right after the service. And apparently they got two of the wheels off of it. But so we're making progress. So just ignore that as we do our Bible study tonight. We do our chapter 41. We started the second part of the book, the second of the book, Isaiah of the book. Last week, we did it on chapter 41. What an amazing, full chapter that was. And if you didn't get a chance to look at that Bible study. And then, I didn't mention this last time. I did mention that Isaiah is broken into two sections, thematically is in two sections. Let me please into one section, 39 and 42, 66. There are some that theorize that Isaiah did not write 42, 66. That was a later author, I don't believe that. I subscribe this all to be the prophecies through Isaiah. And that's why it's named on that part last time. Isaiah 41 tonight. Beginning in verse 1. I'm going to read about 5 or 6, 7 verses, and then we'll talk about it. Isaiah 41. Be silent before me. Be silent before me. You let the nations renew their strength. Let them renew their strength and speak. Come forward and speak at the place of judgment. Who has stirred up one from the east, calling him from the east, and righteousness to his service. He hands nations over to him, and subdues kings before him. He turns them to dust with his sword, with wind-blown chaff with his bow. He pursues them and moves on unscathed, but on a path he have not traveled before. Who has done this and carried it through, calling forth the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, with the first of them, and with the last, I am He. The islands have seen it, and fear. The ends of the earth tremble. They approach and tremble forward. Each helps the other and says to his brother, be strong. Craftsman encourages goldsmith. And he who smooths with the hammer smooths spurs on him who strikes with the anvil. He says to the welding, he nails down the idol so it will not topple. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. This has come up once before about the idols not toppling, and I told you this is a bit of an insult. It's not a bit of an, it's intended as an insult to the false idols, because idols are false gods. They don't exist, so they don't even have the ability to stand upright as an idol. That's the big concern, is that they don't topple. If you remember way back when, and every Israelite could have told you this, when the Ark of the Covenant was captured by the Philistines and they put it in the temple of Dagon, and they came in the next day and Dagon is face down on the floor. He toppled. And that was a huge statue. And so there's this reference, again, second time in Isaiah that it's mentioned that this skilled laborer nails down the idol so that it will not topple. God convenes this court and asks the nations to present their case against him. That's in verse 1. Be silent before me, you islands, or you nations. Let the nations renew their strength. Let them come forward and speak. Let us meet together at the place of judgment. For us, even today, a place of judgment would be a courtroom where a judgment is rendered or decided. Isaiah writes about the islands, that's King James Version, or the coastlands, referring to the most distant places from the Holy Land. Produce your cause, he challenges these nations, or in NIV says, present your case. God's not afraid of the nations because he is greater than the nations. He controls their rise and their fall. He announced that he would raise up a ruler named Cyrus. And interestingly enough, he's mentioned later on, I think it's in chapter 42, by name, who would do his righteous work on earth by defeating other nations for the sake of the people of Israel. Cyrus was a very interesting guy, by the way. Cyrus would be a shepherd. We see that in chapter 44, verse 28. He was anointed by God. Chapter 45, verse 1 tells us that. Not that he was a godly man, but he was anointed by God and called by God to do what God wanted him to do. And he's the one who took over Babylon, who allowed the Jews to go back to Israel, allowed Nehemiah to rebuild the walls, Zerubbabel to rebuild the temple. And that all came from Cyrus, or beginning with Cyrus, to allow them to come back. So God moved in the heart of Cyrus to be gracious to God's people and allow that remnant to go back and rebuild. But God was in control of it all, and that's the point of this passage. He worked in the mind of Cyrus, and frankly, he can do anything else he wants. He treads on rulers as if they were mortar, as if he were a potter treading the clay, it says. Isaiah called Cyrus by name, again in chapter 45, verse 1, and that was over a century before he was born, around 590 BC. And while Isaiah nowhere calls Cyrus God's servant, Cyrus did serve God by fulfilling God's purpose. God handed the nations over to Cyrus and helped him to conquer great kings. That's verse 1 through 4. It's a reference to Cyrus. When it says he, the enemy was blown away like chaff in dust because the eternal God was leading the army. So as Cyrus moved across the territory, east and north of the Holy Land, that's verse 25, the nations were afraid and turned to their idols for help. With King Satire, Isaiah describes various workmen helping each other manufacture a God who in reality cannot even help them. Verse 8, but you, O Israel, my servant Jacob, whom I've chosen, you descendants of Abraham, my friend, I took you from the ends of the earth. From its farthest corners, I called you. I said, you are my servant. I've chosen you and have not rejected you. So do not fear, for I am with you. Don't be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. All who rage against you will surely be ashamed and disgraced. Those who oppose you will be as nothing and perish. Though you search for your enemies, you will not find them. Those who wage war against you will be as nothing at all. For I am the Lord, your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. Do not be afraid, O worm Jacob, O little Israel, for I myself will help you, declares the Lord, your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. See, I will make you into a threshing sledge, new and sharp, with many teeth. You will thresh the mountains and crush them and reduce the hills to chaff. You will winnow them, and the wind will pick them up, and gale will blow them away. But you will rejoice in the Lord and glory in the Holy One of Israel. The poor and needy search for water, but there is none. Their tongues are parched with thirst. But I, the Lord, will answer them. I, the God of Israel, will not forsake them. I will make rivers flow in barren heights and springs within the valleys. I will turn the desert into pools of water and the parched ground into springs. I will put in the desert the cedar and the acacia, the myrtle and the olive. I will set pines in the wasteland, the fir and the cypress together, so that people may see and know, may consider and understand that the hand of the Lord has done this, that the Holy One of Israel has created it. Now, I know this is a different prophecy, but I have to state that that's exactly what's going on in Israel right now. As far as in the desert, I will put the cedar and the acacia, the myrtle and the olive. I'll set pines in the wasteland. And that's literally what is happening there through their irrigation and their water reclamation from the Mediterranean Sea and converting it into fresh water by the millions of gallons a year. Verse 21, present your case, says the Lord. Set forth your arguments, says Jacob's king. Bring in your idols to tell us what is going to happen. Tell us what the former things were, so that we may consider them and know their final outcome. Or declare to us the things to come. Tell us what the future holds, so we may know that you are gods. Do something, whether good or bad, so that we will be dismayed and filled with fear. But you're less than nothing, and your works are utterly worthless. He who chooses you is detestable. I have stirred up one from the north, and he comes, one from the rising sun who calls my name. He treads on rulers as if they were mortar, as if he were a potter treading the clay, who told of this form from the beginning, so we could know, or beforehand, so that we could say he was right. No one told of this. No one has foretold it. No one heard any words from you. I was the first to tell Zion, look, here they are. I gave to Jerusalem a messenger of good tidings. I looked, but there's no one among them to give counsel, no one to give answer when I asked them. See, they are all false. Their deeds amount to nothing. Their images are but wind and confusion. Now, he says quite a bit in this section, so just a few words. God's servant Israel, that's mentioned here in verses 8 through 29. We'll see it again in chapter 43. The prophet presents four pictures to encourage the people. In contrast to the fear experienced by the Gentile nations is the confidence shown by Israel, God's chosen servant, because God was working on their behalf. In spite of their past rebellion, Israel was not cast away by God. The Jewish captives did not need to fear either Cyrus or Babylon, because Cyrus was working for God, whether he realized it or not, and Babylon would be no more. As you read this paragraph, you sense God's love for his people and his desire to encourage them to trust him for the future. When he makes it very clear, they cannot trust false gods because the false gods don't know the future any more than they knew the past because they're not real. But God knows. The title, My Servant, is an honorable title. It was given to great leaders like Moses in Numbers chapter 12 or David in 2 Samuel 3, the prophets, Jeremiah 7, and it was ascribed to the Messiah in Isaiah 42:1. We'll get to that. But is there any honor in being called a worm? Did you notice that? Oh, worm Jacob. Nobody's flattered at that. It's the ideal that Jacob is small and weak in and of themselves, but they are inconquerable in the hands of God. Servant is defined what they were by God's grace and calling, but worm described what they were in themselves. Imagine a worm getting teeth and threshing mountains into dust like chaff. As the nation marched ahead by faith, every mountain and hill would be made low. And that's what he says in verse 4. And the Lord would turn mountains into molehills through the little worm Jacob. So God can take even little worms and do whatever he wants. From the pictures of a servant and a worm, Isaiah turned to the picture of a desert becoming a garden in verses 17 through 20. The image reminds us of Israel's wanderings in the wilderness and God's provision for their every need. Water and trees are important possessions in the East and in Azal. And God will supply both to his people. Certainly, Isaiah was also looking beyond the return from Babylon to the future kingdom when the desert shall rejoice and blossom like the rose. We saw that in chapter 35, verse 1. The final picture is that of the courtroom. Produce your cause means to present your case. God challenged the idols of the nations to prove that they were really gods. Did any of their predictions come true? What have they predicted about the future? Did they announce that Cyrus would appear on the scene or Jerusalem would be restored? No one told of this. No one foretold it. No one heard any words from you, taunted God in verse 26. Not only were the idols unable to make any valid predictions, they were not even able to speak at all. The judgment of the court was correct. See, it says in verse 29, they are all false. Their deeds amount to nothing. Their images are but wind and confusion. So I know that was a quick overview of chapter 41. Any comments or questions about any of that?
I love the fulfillment Israel did. I mean, how many centuries did the Arabs and all the other nations have in that area and remain desert? I mean, it remains arid. I mean, one generation, Israel goes in there and blooms it.
And by the way, this is what you say is an interesting thought. When they were coming out of enslavement from the Egyptians, Moses is leading them. God, I mean, there's nothing out there. There was nothing out there before they got there, nothing out there after they got there. But while they were there, God would make streams appear. God would produce manna and quail. And so God just made provisions come out of nowhere into a place where no provision was present. God fully knew that this is not a place that would sustain life, let alone 2 or 3 million people. So he made it happen, and he made it happen every single day. But
Who would have thought that Israel would be exporting agriculture?
yeah. Now, forward to today, it's correct. And if you go to the Middle East today, or you watch it on TV, as I'm sure you've been doing in the last few days, Israel has, as I said, transformed, but they seem to be the only ones. I don't see any of this in Iraq, not on large scale, maybe on the coast, of Dubai or something, but as soon as you get out of the city, it's just nothing. It's sand. It's desolate. Even in Egypt and you could go on, Qatar and all of these other Middle East countries, it's not a place I would want to live. Hot and arid, just a little, they create a little oasis just for themselves. This is not what has happened in Israel. Israel is transforming the entire country, is becoming green. All right, I don't want to go too long about that, but it is remarkable that this description is so aptly descriptive of what's happening today. All right, any other comments or questions about chapter 41? Something very interesting is going to happen in chapter 42. Let's take a look at this. Verse 1. Here is my servant. Well, right off the bat, this is a defining moment in chapter 42 and in Isaiah. Here is my servant. We'll see who my servant is in a minute. Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his law the islands will put their hope. I want to read 3 and 4 again. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his law the islands will put their hope. Now hold your place there and look with me in Matthew chapter 12, verse 18. Matthew 12, 18. This is what it says about Christ. Matthew 12, 18. Here is my servant, whom I've chosen, the one I love, in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he leads justice to victory. In his name the nations will put their hope. So, in verse 1, here is my servant. Who's the servant? It's ultimately a reference to Jesus, obviously, because it's quoted in the Gospel of Matthew. And so you can also say that my servant is a reference to Israel, which is clearly the case that we're going to see in verse 19. And definitely Israel was upheld as chosen by God, and Israel was his delight when they were being good. But the statements in verse 1 through 4 suggest clearly that here that the servant is a reference to the Messiah. The one has the Spirit of God on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. So as God's servant, Jesus did what Israel could never do. He perfectly carried out the will of the Father so that people everywhere, the nations, may believe in the Holy One of Israel. Verse 5. So back to our passage. Verse 5. This is what God the Lord says. He who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and all that comes out of it, who gives breath to its people and life to those who walk in it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles, to open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. God promised to assist the servant in his mission, which God can do because he's the creator. As it says, he created the immense heavens and the earth. And it goes on and will in chapters 44, 45, and 48, and 51 talk about that very thing. And also in life itself, including man, he gave man his breath. He spoke to his servant. In chapter 42, we'll see that. God assured him that he had been called to perform the will of God. Though Cyrus would be the servant to release Jewish captives from the exile, the Messiah gives spiritual release, spiritual sight, and light to those who trust in him. I have to mention something to you that I think is deeply personal in verse 6. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. Did you notice this? I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and make you to be a covenant for the people and light for the Gentiles. Now, I very much see this picture of a parent and a child taking their small child by the hand because the child cannot take care of themselves. The child cannot defend themselves. The child does not know the way to go. And so you take your children by the hand and you lead them and guide them. I'm going to get in trouble. Cherry is upstairs right now giving her testimony, so I'll give you just a little testimony of my own. I went to Hong Kong on a mission trip, and I preached in a couple of Southern Baptist churches in Hong Kong. They were sweet congregations. Cherry ended up being, let's say, my tour guide. There was a group of people. She was part of a group of people, but that group of people dwindled quickly over the days, and it just became Cherry. Now, we went on a date, and she knew, and I knew that that's what it was. Of course, I'm a young pastor. I didn't feel young at the time, 33, but that seems young today, and she was 22. And so there we are on the other side of the planet, and we're in Hong Kong, which is wall-to-wall people in 1997, and we're walking along, weaving through the crowds, because it was just, I don't know where we were. We're someplace, some outdoor place, some famous park or something, and it was just wall-to-wall people. By the way, we're in Texas, so finding a quiet place isn't too hard. You just get in the car and drive 10 miles one way or another. It's getting a little harder, but still, there's a lot of land here. In Hong Kong, there's a lot more people than land, and so it's just very crowded everywhere you go. And so we're weaving our way through the crowd, and this is the first time we held hands. So, by the way, fun fact, Cherry had never held a guy's hand before. She certainly never kissed a guy, but she never held a guy's hand before. Never been on a date in her life. I was the first. I was the nicest guy she'd ever dated. By default. So this is the moment, and it happened out of necessity. We are weaving through single file. I'm trying to catch up with her as she's making her way through the crowds. She's better at it than I am. I'm from Texas. I don't have to weave through the crowds much, but she was accustomed to it there in Hong Kong, and so I don't know if she remembers this or not. I haven't asked her. She reached back and she took my hand, again, out of necessity, but still. So it happened. She took my hand, and we began to hold hands. And that was a turning point for us, the power of touch, the power of one leading another with them to the right place. And I will never forget that. There was a magical moment for both of us. And of course, any of you are married or dated, you had that moment too. Well, here, this beautiful, intimate picture, verse 6, I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles. I just find that to be very deeply personal statement by God about how his relationship with his people is, and with you and I. All right, verse 8. I am the Lord, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another or my praise to idols. See, the former things have taken place, and new things I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you. So God is Israel's covenant-keeping Lord. He'd given the prophecy in verses 6 and 7, and he will not let idols take credit for his prophecy. In view of all that God had already done for Israel, that is the former things, these new things that he just mentioned, of which he had been speaking, would certainly happen. No other God can foretell of such things, because there is no other God. Verse 10, see if this doesn't sound familiar. Sing to the Lord a new song, his praise from the ends of the earth. You who go down to the sea and all that's in it, you islands and all who live in them. Let the desert and its towns raise their voices. Let the settlements where Kedar lives rejoice. Let the people of Selah sing for joy. Let them shout from the mountaintops. Let them give glory to the Lord and proclaim his praise to the islands. The Lord will march out like a mighty man, like a warrior. He will stir up his zeal. With a shout, he will raise the battle cry and will triumph over his enemies. For a long time, I've kept silent. I've never been quiet and held myself back, but now, like a woman in childbirth, I cry out, I gasp and pant. I will lay waste to the mountains, and hills will dry up all their vegetation. I will turn rivers into islands and dry up the pools. I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I will guide them. I will turn the darkness into light before them and make the rough places smooth. These are the things I will do. I will not forsake them. But those who trust in idols, who say to images, you are our gods, will be turned back in utter shame. So this is a great section here. People everywhere, it says, should sing this song of praise to God. As you saw at the beginning of the section, it's a song that we should sing. And again, the Old Testament is replete with passages telling us, commanding us to sing, regardless of our ability to sing or the beauty of our voice. It doesn't mention that. It says, sing. Not because we have ability, but because we have a song. There's something to sing. And these should include, first, people who made their living by sea commerce. He mentioned that. Second, by those who live in the islands. He mentions that. And third, by those in the desert regions and towns. He mentions Kedar. That is an area in northern Arabia. And Selah was a city in Edom. So very different places, but both very arid. People everywhere should sing and shout to the Lord because of his victory over his enemies at the Messiah's second coming. Now, I know this doesn't directly relate, but I saw something this week that I have never seen before in my life. Millions throughout the world of Iranians marching and holding up Israeli flags. Have you seen that? American flags and Israeli flags. Iranians holding up in jubilation American and Israeli flags, who I thought was their enemy. And verbally, as they come to the announcers or to the people, the camera people, saying, thank you, Israel, for liberating us. That's astonishing to me. I just thought they all hated people in Israel, like Hamas or like those in Gaza who tend to hate people in Israel. But, also notice that sentiment, that anti-Israel sentiment that we see among Hamas and Hezbollah and these extremist groups are not prevalent throughout the rest of the Middle East, because the rest of these Middle Eastern countries are getting bombed by Iran too, and they don't want, nobody's jumping in to help them. Nobody. Even China and Russia are trying to stay out of it. They're keeping really quiet right now. But I just found it very stark and shocking that they're holding up these Muslim Iranians by the thousands are holding up Israeli flags. Don't you find that striking? Yeah. I can make all kinds of applications. I don't know how that fits into the end times. But I hope all that means Jesus is coming back in 3 days. I hope that's true, but I don't know how to translate that into that prophecy. It's just a hope. All right, and so he mentions that here. Verse 18, hear, you deaf. Look, you blind, and see. Who is blind but my servant, and deaf like the messenger I send? Who is blind like the one committed to me, blind like the servant of the Lord? You've seen many things, but have paid no attention. Your ears are open, but you hear nothing. It's like having teenagers. I'm sorry, teenagers, that's not fair. Later, when the Jews in the Babylon exile would read this chapter in Isaiah, they might wonder why they were experiencing such difficulties. Life was hard. Isaiah answered this implied question by pointing out that through the Lord, although the Lord said he would lead them, they were being punished because spiritually they had been deaf and blind. That's what caused all the problems in the first place, which tells us that you can be God's chosen people, and still God will chastise you and punish you and do whatever he needs to do to get you and I, as God's people, even in the 21st century, to act like God's people. Our biggest problem isn't what's going on in Iran or China or Russia. Our biggest problem is what's going on in Hazel and what's going on in our house and in our hearts. And God will do whatever he needs to do to you and I to draw us to him. I hope we are not too blind or too deaf. And even pastors can be blind and deaf from time to time. It's a choice we all make. We don't think that we're blind or deaf, but whenever by the way, there are passages and verses in the Bible we love to talk about because they don't apply to us. We're not tempted in that way. We don't struggle in that way. But there are passages and verses in the Bible that we completely ignore. They do apply to us. Part of that is what I'm going through on Sunday mornings with the definition of love. This Sunday is love keeps no record of wrongs, for example. Now, again, last week was on anger also. And so you see these definitions and how many Christians, how many from pastors on down struggle with these elements, these temptations to lose their temper in this hot-tempered world, and as though that verse doesn't exist, and all the other verses. It's easy for us to just blind ourselves to certain verses because we don't want to do it. Okay, all right, that's a free sermon. But he does talk about the blind and the deaf. So he says, open your ears, open your eyes. It's what he's trying to do. And so Israel had blinded themselves because of their own sin, their own choices. And so God told them to look and to see. Verse 21, it pleased the Lord for the sake of his righteousness to make his law great and glorious. But this is a people plundered and looted, all of them trapped in pits or hidden away in prisons. They have become plunder with no one to rescue them. They've been made loot with no one to say, send them back. By the way, the Mosaic law stipulated that if Israelites lived according to God's righteousness and his standards, he would bless them. In that sense, the law was great and it was glorious. Living by it would reveal to others his righteousness. But Israel did not keep his stipulations. And as a result, if they did not keep his stipulations, they would be driven out of the land, which is exactly what happened. Verse 23, which of you will listen to this or pay close attention in time to come? Who handed Jacob over to become loot and Israel to be the plunderers? Was it not the Lord against whom we have sinned? For they would not follow his ways. They did not obey his law. So he poured out on them his burning anger, the violence of war. It enveloped them in flames, yet they did not understand. It consumed them, but they didn't take it to heart. Now here's the context of what he's saying in this chapter, and particularly here at the end. He says, now this is a prophecy that's given through Isaiah for the future. And the future is about, 70 years away. Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. They're going to be taken off to Babylon, and they're going to be enslaved there until 539, when the Persian king Cyrus comes in, takes over Babylon, and then allows the Jews to begin to come home. Now, for that generation, as they're going through hardships in Babylon, and then really going through a lot of hardships as they come home because everything is just debris, they have to rebuild Israel from scratch. Brick by brick, stone by stone, wall by wall, they have to rebuild the whole thing. This is a hard life. There's no heavy machinery there. There's no company there to help them rebuild all of that. They have to do it just through blood, sweat, and tears. This is not an easy life, not for weeks or months, but for decades. For all of their life, they will be in the rebuilding process. It's a generational effort, so it's a hard life. So why are they going through this hard life? So God, through Isaiah, makes this prophecy ahead of time, so when that day comes and they're going, why am I going through this? They'll already have the answer provided by God right here. God says, when the day comes, here's what I want you to know. This is why it happens, because your forefathers didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't live how they were supposed to live. They didn't follow me, and this is the result. So be careful, you. Don't be blind, he says to this new generation. Don't be blind. I am leading you. I'm guiding you. I'm holding you by the hand, but don't be blind like your forefathers. Don't be deaf like them. Listen to me. Follow me, and it will go well with you. God is trying to reestablish his covenant with them. The worst thing that could happen is that God would allow Jerusalem to be destroyed, the temple to be destroyed, his people to be exiled. And then after that, that's as severe of a punishment as you could get, other than complete annihilation. And after all that would happen, for God to let them come back, and they go back right into the same routine. That would just be awful. And by the way, by the time Christ was born, Israel had a lot of problems. They were spiritually needy. They were spiritually thirsty because the religious elite, the religious teachers of the day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, and the teachers, they had issues. They had poor doctrine. They didn't think they did, but they did. They were spiritually bankrupt. And it affected the people, but at the same time, Israel did not repeat at the same level the kinds of sins that they had committed before Babylon. What a horrible thing it would be. And it's the same for you and I. How many times does God have to teach us the same lesson? How many times do you and I repeat the same sin over and over and over? To the point that we say, God, that's just how I am. We just forget it. I'm done trying. Well, God says, no. So God will do what he needs to do to get us to open our eyes and our ears. All right, that is chapter 42. Any comments or questions about that chapter? Okay, all right. If you would take your prayer sheet for the week. Do we have a prayer sheet? All right, Phil is...